Carolyn Kuski, director of the Bill Atkinson Center, gave a history presentation to members of Retro Metro OKC on the history on Midwest City founder, newspaper publisher, developer, and political candidate Bill Atkinson. The Bill Atkinson Center is located on Atkinson's former 20-acre estate at Northeast 10th and Midwest Boulevard, and includes a preserved ranch home with furnishings and decor dating back to the 1960s when it was built, with hope that it would serve as a governor's state retreat.
My name's Carolyn Kuski. I teach American history and frontier women's history and Oklahoma history at Rose State College. Rose State College owns the property here. So I coordinate the events here and rent the property for if you have a birthday party or a family reunion or a Sunday school social or something like that. This room's for rent, the Pony Barn's for rent, and I handle all those kind of things. I also take care of the home and the archives that Mr. Adkinson left. So I'm very glad to have you all here tonight. It's great. We don't advertise. You know, Rose State College has got no money, as most historical groups don't. So we're always dependent on word of mouth by the community to tell people about our facilities. So it's great to have you guys here, and a lot of you are new people. Dean, I heard you say that you've been here before?
We had a couple of council meetings over here with Larry Hopper in this building.
Okay.
And we had one meeting and they said, we want to come back to this building. And so we enjoyed it. We had about 3 meetings here.
Really? With Mr. Atkinson when he was
No,
here?
I knew Mr. Atkinson toward the end of his life.
Uh-huh.
And also knew that HB, he was on the Transportation Commission for a period of time. Very interesting person. I only knew him in probably the last 6 or 7 years of his life.
Okay. Well, Mr. Atkinson, in case you don't know who he was the founder of Midwest City. In 1942, the Army Air Corps announced that they were going to start building military facilities at the interior portion of the country, because by 1939, of course, World War II was going on in Europe already, and the American people didn't want to get involved in the war, but the administration of Franklin Roosevelt knew that it was coming down the pike. So the military started to introduce new facilities in the interior part, and they announced that they were going to build a new Army Air Corps base somewhere in the Midwest. You know, their geography was a little bit off because this is not the Midwest, technically, but that's what they called it. So they said it was either going to be in Wichita, Kansas, Muskogee, or the Oklahoma City area. This was a published story in the Daily Oklahomans. So Mr. Atkinson had become the largest home builder in the state of Oklahoma between 1936 and 1939. That tells you what kind of a salesman he was. During the Great Depression, he became the largest home builder in the state. He knew the surrounding area around Oklahoma City very well, and he deduced that the military base was going to be built out here just south of 29th Street. So he came out to the farm. This was all settled in the land run, okay, of 1889. Most of the quarter sections that had been settled in the land run had been converted by then into square mile farms owned by one family, because quarter sections technically is really not enough to run a family farm, a working farm. So Mr. Atkinson went over to 29th Street and talked to the farmers on the south side of 29th Street, and they didn't want to discuss selling their property. They were kind of nervous about it. And he went to one house, and the housewife was at home, and she said, you know, I can't talk about it, but I think if you come back in 6 months, if we're still here, then we might want to sell to you. Well, he deduced from that there had been an option taken on that land. Then that was probably going to be where the base was going to be built. So we went across the street to the north side of 29th Street and asked the farmers over there, do you want to sell your land? And they're going, yeah, we want to sell our land. So he bought 2 quarter sections right across from where the new Midwest Air Depot was going to be built. That was in 1941. Midwest Air Depot was commissioned in 41 before Pearl Harbor, and construction began in the spring of 1942. So Mr. Atkinson devised a plan to build a completely self-sufficient town that would service the needs of the Air Corps base. Because it's 10 miles from Oklahoma City. How are people going to get out here, right? Where are they going to live? They're going to drive back and forth. I mean, everybody didn't have cars yet, right? Especially during the wartime. And he was concerned about people getting out to the base to work, so he worked with the Army Air Corps and determined to build a self-sufficient town out here that would have housing, schools, churches, businesses, shopping, grocery stores, parks, everything a town should have. So in that regard, Mr. Atkinson was like a frontier town builder. He came out and purchased the land and designed the infrastructure for a complete town. He built the shopping center himself and rented the space. He developed the lots. He put in the utilities, developed the lots, developed the street plan with a man named Seward Mott, who had been FHA, the first director of the Federal Housing Authority during the Great Depression. They came up with a street plan, and then Mr. Atkinson sold the lots for the home building to 12 developers, 12 home builders, and they came out and built the homes. He didn't build the first homes out here. In fact, he didn't build any homes for a number of years. He was just a developer. Dean?
Can we ask questions if we have to?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Was Howard Thornton one of those builders? Does that name anything to you?
Yes. I've got their picture on the wall in there, and we'll look and see. There's 12 builders. I can't remember all of them. It's very well possible because there's a Thornton Drive. Yeah. He was a home builder.
Bella Vista, I think, along in those areas.
But that would have been after the first two quarter sections were built in 42 and 43. Then the next two quarter sections, which we call the original square mile, were built in 43. And then Thornton Drive wasn't built until the 50s, mid to late 50s. But it's possible. Well, I'll answer your question as soon as I look at that picture. I can't keep everything. I'm, as old as I am, I just can't keep everything up there anymore. So Mr. Atkinson bought this whole square mile out here between Midwest Boulevard, Air Depot, 10th, and Reno. And this was what we would call today a hobby farm, okay? He had, it had been farmland, and he continued to farm it. He had a caretaker that lived out here who was a Creek Indian. And he had horses and cattle and chickens and birds, and he and his family lived in Oklahoma City, but this was kind of their weekend getaway place. Well, the colonel who was building Tinker Air Force Base was named Colonel Turnbull, and he asked Mr. Atkinson if he'd build a cabin out here that his officers could use as an officers club, because they couldn't, while they're building the base, fighting World War II, materials are all rationed, they can't build an officers club. It'd be kind of frivolous in the middle of war. So Mr. Atkinson built this building, the building you're sitting in. Colonel Turnbull designed this fireplace. It's got a fireplace in the center that can operate on gas or logs. It's got a bread oven on this side. And on this side, it has an indoor smoker.
That's what that is.
So the officers could come out, and this building was built in 42, okay? It looked just like it does now, except it wasn't painted and it had a concrete floor. That alcove over there is where the men would throw their saddles after they'd been out riding the horses all afternoon. So it was kind of, I think of it kind of as a man cave before we got hold of it, and before Mr. Atkinson's family moved out here. So they could put a big ham or turkey in the smoker and let it cook while they're out riding horses on the range out there, and then come in and have Mr. and Mrs. Atkinson. That was their master bedroom. Every bedroom here had its own bath with a shower, toilet, and sink. So in 1942, that was just unheard of. People didn't have a bedroom with a bath. You had 3 bedrooms and 1 bath for the whole family. So he was quite forward-thinking in some of his ideas. Now, before we go into the house, we'll step in there to that room that was his master bedroom, and we'll look in the shower. You got to check out the shower in the master bedroom. I'm not going to tell you what's in there, but it's strange. It's strange, and it's part of Mr. Atkinson's love of novelty. So I'll tell you that story after we see it. It is kind of intriguing. Then they lived out here on the country cabin until the early 50s, and the Democratic Party began to vet him to run for governor. And he said, you know, I can't really run for governor and have this little country cabin to be my personal home. I need something that's has a little bit more status. So he decided to build the new part of the house, what we call the new part. It began in 54, it ended in 55. It's 8,500 square feet. So altogether, including the cabin, there's about 9,000, a little over 9,000 square foot of home here. The home he envisioned would be a VIP bed and breakfast. While he's governor and his family lives at the governor's mansion, he'd try and get important people, important businessmen, dignitaries, maybe foreign visitors, and they could stay out here on his country estate with a staff of servants, and boy, would they be impressed with Oklahoma. Yeah, we want to move our business to Oklahoma. It's great. Well, and then his other vision for the house was he'd be elected governor a couple of times, maybe he'd be senator a couple of times. He's already in his 50s, right? He'd be a senator a couple of times, and by the time he passed away, he would be Mr. Oklahoma. And he'd leave that home to the state of Oklahoma as a historic site. You see, he had a vision. He had a lot of vision. So when the house was built and decorated, it was done so with the idea it was going to belong to the Oklahoma people. This is not personal property, it's going to be public property, okay? So everything that was put in there was, the furniture's custom made with a few exceptions of things they brought with them from Oklahoma City. The finest fabrics, silk, linen, leather, cotton, some cotton, not very much, wool, everything's natural fibers, there's no synthetics. It was designed, the interior was designed by John Hobbs and Company, which was the premier, John Hobbs and Orville Recknagel was his partner, and they were the premier interior design firm in Oklahoma City. The architect was Gene Bowles, who also designed Senator Kerr's home over in Poto. And if you've been to Senator Kerr's home, you'll see some similarities in some of the furnishings and fixtures throughout the house. So Mr. Atkinson ran for governor in 58 in the primary and 62 in the general election on the Democratic ticket, lost both times. So now what? He's got $1 million house out here on his farm, and what's he going to do with it? Well, they decided that they would preserve it as the founder of Midwest City's home. So even though the big vision for the house kind of took a dive, they still preserved it as a historical value for the community out here. So they lived in the house for their whole life. Mrs. Atkinson died in 89, Mr. Atkinson died in 99. He remarried after Ruby died in 89. He remarried late in life, and the other house on the property he built for his second wife. So the home here was always Ruby's home. The other home was Dorothy's home. And she's still alive, and she lives in a nursing home, and that house is rented out. So back to my story. Mr. Atkinson lost the governor's race. But one of the reasons that he said he lost, and there's multiple reasons for this, it's never just one reason, right? But he blamed E.K. Gaylord because when he built Midwest City, Oklahoma City was very upset because what city is Tinker in?
City?
Oklahoma City, right? South of 29th Street is Oklahoma City, at least right here in Midwest City. A little bit farther east and it's Dell City part of the way, and then you get to the river and then it's Oklahoma City. So the lines are very jagged out this way. But Tinker's in Oklahoma City, and E.K. Gaylord and Stanley Draper and Roy Hefner just envisioned all of this land out here being Oklahoma City, right? It's going to be a megalopolis. The largest city in the world was their dream in land area. And in fact it was for a while. But Mr. Atkinson really ruined their dream because he started Midwest City. And a few years later, George Epperly started Dell City, and Bethany, and War Acres, and more. See, Edmond and Norman were already here. They were land rent towns.
Carolyn, weren't E.K. Gaylord and Bill Atkinson friends before that?
They were very good friends. In fact, Mr. Atkinson was kind of the golden-haired boy of Gaylord in the Chamber of Commerce in Oklahoma City. He was bringing Atkinson along And then all of a sudden, Adkinson, in Gaylord's view, stabbed him in the back by starting this new town out here and stealing the thunder of Oklahoma City. So it was a personal insult as well as political and economical insult to Oklahoma City. Adkinson ran for governor. He ran into a brick wall there with the largest paper in the state, who would not back him. He had the backing of the Tulsa World and most of the major newspapers in smaller towns around the state, but not the Daily Oklahoman. So he lost the governor's race, and he blamed E.K. Gaylord for that. Of course, there was other things involved, like a 1-cent sales tax that Mr. Adkinson supported, which is almost always the death knell for a politician, and some other issues. But anyway, he sued the Daily Oklahoma Publishing Company after he lost the election for $1 million. And you're going, whoop-de-doo, $1 million, right? Back then, that was like more money than you'd ever sue anybody for. It was just mind-boggling. You sue them for $1 million? Well, it came down to the courts ruled that he couldn't actually sue because he had been a political candidate, and when you announce you're running for governor, you're fair game. So even though the Daily Oklahoman did print some nasty things about him, it was okay, as far as courts were concerned. So poor Mr. Adkinson is frustrated, and he decided he's going to start his own newspaper, and that's where the Oklahoma Journal came from. He published it here in Midwest City from 1964 to 1979 when he sold it. And his vision for the paper was that it was going to compete with Oklahoma Publishing Company, right? He was going to give them a run for their money. But there were really serious problems in advertising. Advertisers who advertised in the Daily Oklahoma, who advertised in the Oklahoma Journal were not interested, they were not invited to advertise in the Daily Oklahoman, the largest paper in the state. So you've got to advertise in the largest paper in the state if you're a good businessman. So it was very difficult for him to get community support outside of Midwest City. And his financial backing for the newspaper was Senator Robert S. Kerr, who died on January the 1st, 1964, and the paper started publishing in August of 1964. So he lost half of his financial support there when Kerr died, who was his best friend. So he was kind of hamstrung, but still went on to continue to be a very important developer and businessman in the Oklahoma City area. He was the largest fundraiser for Baptist Hospital in 1962. He developed Quail Springs Mall and built the first office building out there. He developed the mall, sold the space for the mall, and then sold the whole package to someone who came in and built it, actually built it.
Didn't he have about a quarter section? He had a large plot of ground over
Yes, he had a lot of land at one time and sold it off for development and for businesses a little at a time.
And there's a street named after him out there too.
there.
There's a street named after him on the south side. Is there one up there at Cross
Through that
Springs?
Quail Springs corporate office park.
Oh, okay,
too.
through the park, yeah, the corporate office park. He started building the apartment complexes on what used to be Southwest 74th Street that is now Interstate 240 along the south side of, there's a street named Adkinson out there. He built pre-manufactured homes, like prefab homes, for the Chickasaw Nation, who was trying to get into the federal housing movement with the tribes. He just had his fingers in a lot of pies.
When they first sold stock in the newspapers, they said they had a printing business that would keep it alive even if the newspaper failed.
A printing business?
Printing, yeah.
Oh, because he did commercial printing,
Yeah,
right. They did
yeah.
do commercial printing. And
Yeah.
the press at the Oklahoma Journal was the first web offset press I think in the United States, maybe. Heidelberg.
It's beautiful
Yes.
color.
Beautiful color pictures.
A couple of things. I used to own a red house here in Midwest City, and I learned that there's a part of the development is a bomber. The streets are in the shape of a bomber.
You know, I've heard that a lot. I've heard it about the original streets in Midwest City.
Well, you
That
just go to the old water tower.
Mhm.
From there.
Yeah, there's
No,
an aerial.
No,
There's-
and I've been trying to see it from here, and I don't have good enough eyes, but
Well, I
it's the
can't.
shape of a bomber.
That's what everybody says, but I've never been able to document that.
Well, you drive around those wings, and the other thing.
Well, I know
Was
you'll
that
get
the
lost,
point?
that's
Was
for
that
sure.
the point of all of the
No,
I mean,
no, the reason the streets are all curved and a stop sign every half a block and cul-de-sacs everywhere
Might be on
was
that.
because Midwest City was built as a walking town. During World War II, people didn't drive everywhere like they do today because tires were rationed, gasoline was rationed. You had children walking to school, people walking to the shopping center. So it was made so traffic couldn't zoom through
Well,
there.
I can almost see it, but I can't see what. I was gonna tell you, one reason that Gaylord might have been particularly upset was, and it's in their history of the Oklahoman. Fort Worth, by the way, was another town they had in mind. They had about 4 towns when they
Gaylords?
knew they were gonna do it.
Oh, the
What
Army
wasn't
Air Force.
known was, they had one day, and they came here, and they were really on their way to Wichita. They had made up their mind. But while they were here, they said, in the morning, they told E.K. Gaylord, now, if we could just get, and really what they asked for was, they wanted somebody to build all of the infrastructure. I mean, the streets, the sewers, the everything.
On the base.
And they wanted a turnkey agreement before they would make their decision. The guy pulled it off in one day. That evening, they were getting ready to go to Wichita, and that's where they had in mind to put it. Because you know, that's.
And they did put one in Wichita and one in
Well, you know,
Muskogee.
that's an airplane town.
Mhm.
And Gaylord handed them an agreement from the Oklahoma City Council and all that other stuff. He was that powerful, he had done it in one day.
Well, they formed a corporation,
And they
Gaylord and,
decided
Well,
that,
the chamber took on the responsibility of getting the options. I think it's like 435 acres in the initial options
Okay.
that they secured for the base. You stand agree? It was very close to EK.
yes, right.
well, yeah, it's those shakers and movers who did it in one day. And they said,
Sounds-
well, what can we do? You get it.
Sounds like the very same effort they did to get the packing plants way back when, doesn't it?
Yeah.
1909, 10.
So it's the same model, isn't it?
That's it.
So they committed, and then Mr. Atkinson comes out and builds a town right across the street. You can imagine how angry they were
They
about
pissed
that.
him off.
Yeah, sure. But you know, Gaylord would have done the exact same thing if he'd been Mr.
See, he
Atkinson's
outranked
shoes.
him. He did it. I mean, you got C.A. Vols, you got a very select group of people who used to meet up there in that very first floor, that first, and
Yes.
they'd have their little old table over in the corner, and they would just be a select few around there, and they decided pretty much the direction, and,
They had the power.
yeah, they did.
Well, see, and they broke the model of Oklahoma City, which was Classen and, was it Concord, those guys, they bought up all that land north of Oklahoma City, Bel Air, they had, and then they built their own trolley so that people could go from their new houses, and it was really a land deal.
Mhm.
And here Atkinson stole their thunder,
Right.
he took their model out here.
They're all cut from the same mold, really. I mean, it's just who gets there first. It's kind of that kind of competition.
Before we start the tour, did Gaylord and Atkinson ever make up, or did they remain hostile toward each
You
other
know,
toward the end?
Mr. Atkinson was not, until after the governor's race, he blamed Gaylord, but he also realized that it was business. That was the business world. I can't find anything where he held a grudge against Gaylord after the lawsuit was dismissed.
I think that's
Um,
true. I think he still had some feeling for the Gaylord
I think
family,
he
for all
did.
that they did.
The animosity really came from the west
Yeah, and he
toward
held-
us, and
his
not so
son
much
was
going
even
back
more.
that way. Yes, his son carried the
Could really carry a poison.
the grudge. Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, in my lifetime, yeah, E.L. Gaylord
Yeah.
did not.
Also, I was.
And Midwest City
Fancy.
suffered for that, I mean, in a lot of ways, because
Well,
like when Rose State started in 1970, it was very difficult, and sometimes we still, I don't know if it's still true, but people talk about it, can't get publicity from Daily Oklahoma. They don't want to promote Midwest City.
Now, Mr. Hack,
No,
really was
I'm
our
sure
first
anymore.
shopping center.
Okay.
It's now understaffing is what's the issue
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah, you can think about
Well,
that.
I didn't think.
But Jeremy he came and really did the first shopping center, coming out here on 29th Street.
Mhm.
And I think it was a model city or an all-America city early on.
Model
It was put together in such a way it got a national recognition.
Well, there's an interesting story behind that. Midwest City was voted by the National Home Builders Association. It was selected as America's model city in 1951. Just so happens the president of the National Home Builders Association in 1951 was W.P. Bill Atkinson. So, yeah, but it was selected out of 100 towns. But it was, my mother and dad moved here in '49, and my mother said that she had never seen such a cute little town in her life. You know, everything was new, and it was landscaped, and it was pretty, and she said it just looked like storybook land. She just loved it. Let me tell you one more story about Mr. Atkinson. And this ties in with the what you'll see in the shower a little bit, because he loved novelty. So in 1951, he started building new homes up here on the hill in Reno in a subdivision known as Ridgecrest Country Estates. Each house was on a half an acre, and each house was about 2,000 square feet, which is like twice the size, over twice the size of the original homes. And they sold for $20,000 to $25,000, and he couldn't sell the first house. Now, he had always sold the home before he even began construction. That's what a good home builder he was. He couldn't sell the first house up there in Ridgecrest because it was so expensive. So he decided to put a little barn and a little corral and a Shetland pony at the back of each lot. And if you buy the house, you get a free pony. And that started him on the business of raising ponies.
So that's where the pony
And he
barn-
built the pony barn down here in 1951. And he built a bridle path between the pony barn and the last house in Ridgecrest. And when a little kid, Shetland ponies are they're the worst animal.
Yeah, it's amazing he didn't get shot ever after giving people
I
ponies.
know, because they are so
Holy
ornery.
moly.
But you didn't have to keep your pony in your yard, you could keep it down here, and he hired little junior high boys as wranglers, and so you could call the barn and say, bring me my pony, and they'd bring the pony to your house, and you could ride all out here in the country, and then come home and watch Roy Rogers and Gene Autry on TV at night. So,
And your children lived in this,
just
and
an
you give them
idyllic
espresso and a
childhood.
puppy.
And then on Sunday afternoon, he developed a herd of his own of 300 ponies. Mr. Atkinson was workaholic. He didn't relax one day in his life, I don't think. And he had 300 ponies, and he would have community pony rides on Sunday afternoon. So any kid could just come over and ride the ponies around the corral. And a lot of people have that memory from if you were raised in Midwest City.
How long did he continue with the ponies?
They phased out in the 60s. You know, everything changed after the British invasion in music in '64. But ponies kind of went the way of the cowboy, and it got less and less. But he bought a male pony for $4,000, and 10 years later he sold it for $40,000. That's how big the pony craze was. It was just on fire in the 50s. So he recognized that and cashed in on it. Oklahoma Journal. Yes.
The Oklahoma Journal building, how is he related to?
He's the grandson.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Atkinson had 2 daughters and a son. His son had 9 children, and Joe Atkinson is one of those children. He's the biggest land developer here in Midwest City today, and he owns the shop. He took over Mr. Atkinson's businesses, so he owns the shopping centers and he owns the Oklahoma Journal building.
Really a nice guy.
Yes, very nice guy.
You know, the
And
Journal had a big business in North Oklahoma City. I think most people quit Oklahoma.
is that right in North Oklahoma City? Oh
Yeah.
wow, I didn't know that.
Because they didn't like Gaylords.
So
Wow.
after the Oklahoma Journal quit publishing, did they publish the Midwest City Sun in that same building?
No.
Or am I wrong on that?
No, that was out of different. That was a whole
Okay.
different
Is that
outfit.
Nick Hampton, or that group?
So it's a different deal.
It is now, I think, or whoever
Must
bought
be.
it, or I can't remember now how that all. It's kind of muddled, but no, the Oklahoma Journal was just the Oklahoma Journal until he sold it. Now he sold it to businessmen from California who closed it down the next year. And there's some speculation. I don't know if you could ever prove it, but that Gaylord was the money behind the purchase to run them out of business. But it was going down anyway. I mean, it couldn't get anywhere. He bought all the stock back and paid face value for the stock himself to buy it all back, so nobody lost. Because it was a public company from day one. And people in Midwest City thought that they were going to be able to share in the wealth, right?